Hello friends, I am Nisha Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of English. The topic under discussion today is an introduction to Rabindranath Tagore and his play, The Post Office. Rabindranath Tagore, an Indian writer of all forms of literature, as well as a painter and composer, predominantly wrote in Bengali, though several of his poems and plays have been translated into English. Originally written in Bengali in 1912, Dagghar was translated into English as the Post Office and performed in 1913 by the Abbey Theatre Company in Dublin, Ireland and London, England. The play was then published in English in 1914. Now, an introduction to Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore was born on May 7, 1861 in Calcutta, India, which was then under British rule. His mother was named Sarda Devi and his father, Rabindranath Tagore, was a scholar, religious reformer, philosopher, and writer. Tagore began writing at an early age, publishing poetry in various magazines and journals by the age of 13. By the age of 16, he had already gained recognition for his poetry. He is the author of the first short story ever to be written in Bengali, Bhikharini, 1877, The Beggar Woman. He continued to write poetry and verse plays at this time, and he also began composing Hindu devotionals. In 1879, Tagore left India to pursue his studies at the University College of London, but he did not enjoy attending school and returned home without a degree in 1880. Tagore married Mrinalini Devi Rai Chaudhary on December 9, 1883. While his family was still young, Tagore began managing some of the family estates, traveling to villages that are now part of Bangladesh. His experiences and travels over this period are reflected in Sonar Tari, his first significant collection of poems. The short stories he wrote at this time also portrayed village life. He wrote not only plays, poems, and short stories, but also novels, plays, and children's books. Over this time, his style evolved from romanticism to realism, and he experimented with different literary forms never attempted in Bengali literature, assuring his place as a prominent Bengali writer. By 1911, only a small portion of Tagore's output had been translated into English. Planning his own trip to England but being too ill to travel, Tagore instead worked on translating his Bengali works into English. He particularly worked on translating the prose poems from his 1910 collection, Gitanjali. By early 1912, Tagore was well enough to travel to England with his completed translation. There, his work was championed by famed poets W. B. Yeats and Ezra Pound. And Yeats wrote the introduction to the 1912 English language edition of Gitanjali. During the early 20th century, the Nobel Prize was awarded for a single work of literature, and in 1913, Tagore received the prize for Gitanjali. He was the first Asian Nobel laureate. Leaving England in late 1912 for a lecture tour in America, Tagore returned to London in April of 1913. There he saw the Abbey Theatre Company's performance of the Post Office. Originally written in Bengali in 1912 as Dagghar, the play was translated and performed in English shortly thereafter. It was then published in English in 1914. By this time, given his receipt of the Nobel Prize and his prominent literary advocates in England and America, Tagore became an internationally renowned literary figure, traveling the world and giving lectures. In 1915, Tagore was knighted by the British government. Aside from his writing, Tagore had progressive views on education, politics, and religion. He founded an ashram, a spiritual community, and associated school in 1901. In 1919, he resigned his knighthood as an act of political protest. He is the author of the National Anthem of India and of the National Anthem of Bangladesh. His paintings, which Tagore began to work on in his later years, were exhibited throughout Europe. Now, about the play. At the heart of the play is a young boy, Amal, through whose imaginative mind life is celebrated. In spite of the child's illness, the play's universal appeal has made it a world classic because of because of his integrated austerity with complexity. The English translation of this play was done by the celebrated poet W.B. Yeats. Gandhiji was spellbound by the play in Calcutta in 1917. Anita Desai called it as modest as a dewdrop, as profound as the ocean. Tagore, a unique figure in the history of Indian drama in English, equipped himself with the classics of Indian drama and was at the same time alive to the European dramatic tradition. He has evolved a dramatic form which influenced the Bengali theatre at the beginning of his century. He borrowed many of his themes from Indian mythology, Buddhist legends, and other classical sources without any artistic inhibition or compunction. Edward Thompson remarks, all these dramas are vehicles of thought rather than expression of action. Tagore achieved a complete dramatic integration in his post office. Tagore has the exceptional gift which a very few poets and writers of fairy tales have of consciously utilizing symbols while consciously writing an appealing story. But he seems to be conscious of his gift, and for this cause, he does not resemble the writers of fairy tales and is certainly halfway amidst Coleridge and T.S. Eliot. The play illustrates the tale of the child as perceived by the Indian poets and philosophers. Amal, in his intense yearning to run away from the momentary and materialistic world into the world of ambience, and in his desire to search for individuality and unification with God, to some extent similar to Dhruv and Prahlad. Tagore wrote the post office in 1912. Prior to this play, Tagore lost his son, daughter, wife, and father to disease, all within a few span of few years. The chronology of loss preceding to Tagore's writing of the post office was beyond belief. His wife died in 1912. His oldest son died in 1903. Satish Chand Rai, his subordinate at Santiniketan, died in 1904. His father died in 1905. His younger son, Samindra, died in 1907. In 1911, he wrote the post office in Bengali. Later, he gave a depiction of how he came to accomplish it. One night, while lying underneath the stars on top of his house in Santiniketan and staring at a starlit sky, he had a strange experience. My mind took wing. Fly, fly, I felt an anguish. There was a call to go somewhere and a premonition of death together with an intense emotion. This feeling of restlessness I expressed in writing Dakhar, he explains. The first person to generate an English language edition of the play was W.B. Yeats. He also wrote a preface to it. It was translated into Spanish, which was done by Juan Raymond Zimenez. The French version of translation was done by Andre Guide and read on the radio the night before Paris fell to the Nazis. A Polish version was enacted under the supervision of Janusz Korczak in the Warsaw Ghetto. Somehow, the play takes us to the days of World War II, when the Nazi atrocities were at their height in Europe. Janus Koza, the eminent Polish writer and educator, headed an orphanage at the Warsaw Ghetto. In spite of offers from his friends, he did not agree to leave the ghetto, leaving the children behind. Refuting the orders of Nazi that the Jews should not perform plays by the Aryan authors, he produced the post office with the children at the ghetto on 15th of July 1942. When he was asked why he has chosen the play, Kozak said that eventually one has to learn to accept serenely the angel of death. Tagore's insights into death seem to be deepest with this play. I have had so many experiences of loved ones who have died that I think I have come to know something about death, something perhaps of its deeper meaning. Every moment that I have spent at the deathbed of some dear friend, I have known this. And now the conclusion. The play is about emancipation, spiritual freedom, expansion, new life, liberation. Amal is in love with life and the living universe, and hence every moment of his life is significant to him. His contact with outside world is first with sense, and when the senses exhaust their capacity, it is with his imagination. Thus, the twin themes of this play are love and death. The fact that the post office was chosen on both these occasions proves beyond doubt the power of the play. It teaches the mankind how to deal with the ruthless onslaught of death, especially when it is perceived that death is meaningless and bizarre. It may be recalled in this concept that Kozak and his children were put to death by Nazi rulers immediately after the performance of the post office. Thus, Tagore demonstrates that death, nevertheless, is not such a dreadful thing, that it is not an issue of losing something, but it is an issue of pleasure, victory, and tranquility. The final scene in the play, consequently, may possibly be taken as an objective correlative of the ambiguity, candidates, candidness, serenity, and pleasure, with the purpose of which Tagore wants death to be alive with. Amal signifies the man whose soul had received the call of the open road. Finally, the Bun's gate is unlocked by the king's own physician, and to facilitate, which is death to the world of accumulated wealth and proficient variety, fetches freedom. Liberation is to be hunted out, not in the new world, nevertheless in this world, not subsequent to death, but in this awful life itself. Hence, the play depicts Tagore as a spiritual pragmatist. The play is primarily a metaphor for spiritual freedom, for death has a beginning rather than an ending. The play also presents a social commentary on class structure through the servants who surround the building boy during his illness. In an introduction to the play in Rabindranath Tagore, an anthology, Krishna Datta and Andrew Robinson write that W.B. Yeats called the post office a masterpiece, and that Mahatma Gandhi wrote that he was enraptured by a 1917 performance of the play. Datta and Robinson also note that Tagore's insight into death is perhaps at his best, at its deepest in the post office. The play is generally considered a shining example of Tagore's work, and Datta and Robinson state that in their general introduction to Rabindranath Tagore that the play is the first selection in their collection. Sitanshu Shekhar Chakravarti, writing in Hindu spirituality, post-colonial and modern, sees the play as a religious and spiritual allegory. Through this lens, he finds that the play demonstrates that however much social customs try to segregate us from our real nature, the attempts are doomed to failure. S.K. Desai, writing in perspective on Indian drama in English, wishes to avoid allegorical interpretation in his essay. Instead, Desai observes that structurally the post office is amazingly simple. Nirmal Mukherjee, also writing in perspectives on Indian drama in English, finds that with the post office, Tagore reaches the peak of dramatic excellence. It is rightly considered by nearly all of Tagore's critics to be his best. Thank you.